work. My question is for Dr. Coelho. I'm wondering if you could comment on the scope of MAiD that's being looked at by our committee. Just any comments you have as a family physician and the experience you bring.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. I've watched every hour of the AMAD committee thus far, and up till today, committee members have disputed the truthfulness of stories that have been shared by witnesses who've come forward and said that MAiD professionals are beyond question. Inconsistently, there's been talking on top of experts who have been warning about caution and even questioning their integrity. As well, some physicians on the committee have really failed to provide expected medical expertise surrounding clinical epidemiology or correct guidance on how to approach this as a medical procedure. The cases of concern that we've all mentioned signal that the MAiD regime safeguards do not work to protect Canadians. These stories contradict those statements by Abby Hoffman and committee that there are simply no problems with the MAiD regime. And actually point to inadequate data collection when you can't make good decisions if you don't have data. Committee members asking loaded questions with only one-word answers have tried to paint concerned witnesses as wanting Canadians to suffer through years of useless treatment. But actually, the reality is that patients are waiting years for treatment, and this wears people down. Consider, Alan Weeb testified that if someone wanted MAiD because it took 5 years to access the service, she would consider that irremediable. Patients with unaddressed psychosocial suffering will be therefore given MAiD by assessors like her. And Audrey Bayless said she'd rather die than living in a nursing home. That is actually a statement about the atrocious state of our underfunded long-term care centers. Also, I keep hearing a recurring legal argument that withholding MAiD from certain groups is discriminatory. But this is not how medicine works. In medicine, we have strict medical standard of care safeguards as well as required eligibility to meet a criteria for a treatment. Persons with mental illness, with or without disability, which is often exacerbated by psychosocial suffering, have a disease process that can predispose them to suicidality with no proof that their suffering is irremediable. We just don't have the evidence. Thomas Insel, former head of the NIMH, wrote a book called Healing, in which he confirms the unknown prognosis of mental health disorders, but outlines how prognosis does depend on community life, supports, and productivity. Purpose. In light of this, the government providing death as an option while simultaneously failing its duty to provide timely care, supports, enriching community life, livable income is actually quite shameful. Mr. Luc Thériault reassured us that if the expert panel and special joint committee arrive at the conclusion that mental illness should be excluded, we should be reassured it would be. But we know that the expert panel didn't even weigh on that important question. But the Quebec Commission has decided that MAiD for mental illness should be excluded. Mr. Chair, I thank you for inviting me. The work of this committee is so important, and I ask you for an honest review because your MAiD regime is very dangerous.